Hey everyone, I'm sorry I have not uploaded an album review in a very long time. It's been a couple months now, but I've been kind of thinking behind the scenes and I thought that this would be a better kind of video format to use because it would let me get out a bunch of albums at once, but also make it easier on me. The reason I always stop doing album reviews out of nowhere is because I just can't keep up with the amount of music I want to review and the amount of music that's coming out. So what I decided to do is, instead of doing full-on album reviews, I'm gonna do a video where I review like 10 to 15 albums at once that came out recently in the past like couple months, and then just give like small thoughts and opinions on those, because doing a full album review is really difficult. I might also do some discography reviews if I want to, where the whole discography is in one single video instead of spread out between like multiple. But this specific video is one that I've wanted to do for a while now. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing 5 very small albums that I think you guys should go check out because they are really good. When I was choosing these 5 small albums, I'm not going to be picking things that are like small to the point where there's still a community around them. I'm picking albums to the point where there is zero community behind these albums and artists, and I cannot find anything about them except for their specific music. So we're going to start off this list with the most popular out of the 5, and by most popular, I mean like only 100 monthly listeners. It's just barely hitting the 200 monthly listener mark, and I think this album is absolutely deserving of way more listeners. This album is called 2015 by Taco Fiesta, but on Apple Music, I believe it's called If You Only Saw What I Was Staring At, but I'm going to be calling it 2015 for the sake of myself and this video, so I don't have to keep saying the full album name out loud, and honestly, I don't even know what the real album name is. 2015 is a great mix of pop, folk, and electronic. If you're into albums like Dean Blunt or Terza or Mikachu and the Shapes, this thing's going to be right up your alley. Like I said, it has a very strong Dean Blunt feel to it, especially on his earlier work like The Narcissist 2 and Black Metal, even some hints of Zushi in there a little bit. And I personally think this thing is amazing and deserves so much more recognition than it has. I don't think any of the songs on this album go over 1,000 listens in general. If you want some standouts, I would say Cell is a really good one. I really enjoy Good, Bad, and Leaf, as well as the track Days. The album is pretty rough and kind of poorly mixed at some points, which is the only downside I could really say. Some of the lyrics can sound kind of off-key, or the mixing you can't really hear vocals, but it still kind of just adds to like that lo-fi feel that the album has already. And I think in total, this album is absolutely phenomenal, and I would totally rank it by like a 9.5 out of 10. It's really good. The next album I want to bring up is even smaller, with the artist having only a count of 20 monthly listeners. This album is called This Actually Happens a Lot by Jessen. I've been following Jessen's music for a while now. I've seen her delete a lot of her albums and add new ones. This one's kind of similar to the last album, 2015, but it takes more of an ambient and kind of drony noise approach. There's also some folk songs on here, especially Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Andy Warhol really take to that kind of more folky sound, but they are also really distorted and crazy. I would totally recommend the opener, Golden Princess, which is like one of the greatest ambient tracks I've ever heard, to be honest. I would also really recommend Baseball Stadium in the Sky, which is this kind of really dark and twisted version of some weird humming melody. I absolutely love this one too. If you want kind of a more poppy sound, a little bit kind of on the nerve of hyper pop, I would totally recommend Hottie. If you liked Golden Princess and you want Golden Princess with vocals, I'd recommend Up With Trees. And if you want just pure noise and drone, I would recommend Heartland Shores 4346. This whole album has so much to offer, and the genre switches like 7 times in this thing in its 8-track runtime, which is so cool. And I would also just like to say, go show this artist Jessen some support. She deserves it so much. And almost all of her albums have something new to offer. If you don't like one, go to the next and it's probably something completely different. She has a completely crazy, well-versed style of music, and I could not recommend her stuff enough. Next up, we're going even smaller with an artist who goes by the name C. I think they also go by the name Sea of Dogs, and they also go by Hyphy Skazerbox, which you might have heard before. Pretty prominent artist in kind of the more underground vaporwave scene, released a couple albums on Business Casual, and is now releasing stuff under Sweet 309, I believe. And this is one of her side projects, which is called, I believe, Sea of Dogs, or C. I'm just gonna say C. And this album is called A Casualty of Broken Glass. Again, this is another 10 out of 10 album of mine, and there is a good reason why this thing is up there. This album shows so much raw and just unfiltered emotion throughout the whole thing. All the tracks are produced amazingly well. There are so many just climaxes and bursts of noise throughout this entire thing that will keep you entertained for forever. I listened to this whole album, and there's not a single song in this thing that I do not like. Like, there is not a point in this album where I am not enjoying what I'm hearing. Like I said before, this album is full of emotion. It's full of these kind of really, really loud climaxes of sound where every single instrument bursts into one massive, just explosion of noise, and it is so good. I would definitely recommend I Fall, the intro track, which starts with a more kind of mellow piano, which eventually turns into this very, very kind of like weird, warped, and glitched vocoder voice that's kind of talking into these lyrics. Doe-Eyed Siren is also really good. I love the instrumental on that one. It is so, so good. The Longest Silence is probably one of my favorites off this album. It is the most climactic song out of all of them. I'd also recommend Ditto, which is really interesting with the vocal chops that she does in this song, and they are really, really interesting to hear. I'd also recommend Broken Glass, the outro track, which is my personal favorite off the entire album, and it is the best closer I have ever heard to an album, honestly, in my life. Yeah, like I said, this album's a 10 out of 10. I'm not going to say too much on it. I really would just recommend you go and listen to it, because holy shit, this thing is absolutely brilliant. And I could be sitting here talking about this album for hours. But I'm going to leave it at that. Go listen to it if you want to. A Casualty of Broken Glass by C. Jumping up a little bit more to a larger listener count, with it not even being over 100 again, this artist only has 56 monthly listeners, and this album is really, really interesting. This album's called Careless by Roarcon4. This album is honestly really interesting. I thought it was an album at first, and it looked like there was a lot of songs on here. I thought it was going to be super long because it's 18 songs long, but then I looked at the runtime, it's only 22 minutes because all the songs are around 1 minute long. There's only, I think, a couple that go over 2 minutes, and that's just barely pushing it. The longest song on here is 2 minutes and 38 seconds, so this is obviously some kind of beat tape, and I also love beat tapes. This thing is brilliant. I love this album. I wouldn't rate it a 10, not by any means, because there's a lot of work this thing still needs. There's a lot of songs that are kind of just like very thrown in there to just kind of add more to the runtime, but this thing's really, really good. I would definitely recommend the tracks Paint Thinner, BBB/Ha, Night Skin is really good, Car Top MC is also really good, MUKEGIR, I don't know if it's pronounced Mukger, is also really good, and BTLL109 ? Is the outro, also a pretty good track. If you're into like Antoj or Knowledge, this thing is definitely going to be up your alley. Also, if you're really into the kind of more underground beat tape soul hop scene of SoundCloud, like artists Corpse Wax or Cold Plush Toy or ARET, this thing's definitely gonna also be up your alley. And yeah, it's just a really good beat tape. I would totally recommend it. A lot of really cool sounds on here, a lot of really cool textures, really, really interesting and just really punchy beats on this thing. Check it out, it's really good. And finally, this last album is actually not on streaming services, and the only place you can really find it is on Bandcamp, but it's definitely worth the search because this thing's really, really good. If you take out the last half of it, because the last half of this album is obviously a joke, but the first half is phenomenal. If you're wondering what album I'm talking about, this album is called Lil Shitstorm, What's My Name, Fuck by Froy. Can you tell this is supposed to be a joke? This album does sound, and it looks a lot like it's just gonna be a huge joke project, and it kind of is. It was released on a record label that was meant to be like jokes called Push to Talk to Push Music, which is now called Push to Org to RT. This is not like meant to be a serious project. But when I tell you that this thing has gotten stuck in my head multiple times, it has. Remember when I just mentioned recently about the artist Corpse Wax being down in kind of the soul hop SoundCloud scene? This is Corpse Wax. This is a side project of Corpse Wax. When this album was first released on a label, I didn't think anything of it because at that time people were just kind of throwing in random albums. There was an album called Artist Musician, which is just that photo of the dude holding like a starfish up to the camera, and all it is a kick drum for like 30 seconds on each song. There's nothing on this label that I would really be excited to hear. I saw this album pop up, and when I first saw it, I didn't even think to listen to it because it just looked like a shitpost. But then when Corpse Wax told me, hey, this is my album, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. Maybe it's something funny, maybe it's something goofy. What I wasn't expecting was Mr. Wazo and Justice levels of sampling and synths. It's insane. If you're into Mr. Owazo, if you're into Daft Punk, if you're into Justice or Sebastian, this thing is totally gonna be right in your puzzle, that missing puzzle piece of yours. Because the first half of this thing is pure French house bliss. The song Eat Planet Fitness will get stuck in your head super fast with the weird AI generated lyrics that tell you to move up, down, throw that shit all around, and throw that shit back like an eyebrow. It's really catchy, and the sample work on this thing is also really cool. As well as the track Losing Time, which is a lot more kind of focused towards sampling and not really having those lyrics that are meant to be kind of jokey. This track is a lot more serious out of all of them and will definitely catch your attention. And then the track One Off, which is a remix of the last song, Losing Time, and it's even more insane. This song sounds like if you took Losing Time and then melted it into lava and then threw it at some like drum machines. That's what One Off sounds like. It's crazy. You have Peter, Funk Shit, and Slut Fit, which are the last 3 tracks, which kind of add to that more runtime, and these 3 tracks definitely close out the album really well. It's just more kind of funky, danceable, really exciting, kind of groovy little French house or just house tunes. Really, really great. And then you have the last 5 tracks, which I would recommend just skipping in general because there's really no point in listening to these things. It's the only thing holding me back from rating this album really high. Like, I would rate it a 6 out of 10, but the 6 out of 10 is only because of the last 5 tracks. If these last 5 tracks weren't on the album, this thing would easily be an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But I'm not going to say much about these last tracks. I would recommend you just go listen to the full album and just wait for them to start because it will throw you off track so fast. But the rest of the songs on this album are absolutely really cool. I'd recommend checking them out, and if you don't want to hear those last 5 tracks, just skip them completely. There's really no point in listening to them. I'd definitely recommend the first 7, which actually make up a full album, so if you just cut those last 5 out and listen to the 7 that I recommend, that would be really cool. Those are 5 small albums I'd recommend for you to listen to, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to try to keep this format going where I review multiple albums at once. Probably just be a lot more easier for me to do and a lot more simple for me to finish these kind of videos, get them out, and I can kind of have a big break between the videos. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.